Hey guys, Dino at Speed Circuit here, and today we need to talk about a new incoming change to the tuning industry that is going to affect a lot of customers around the world. So this might come as bad news to anyone running a COBB AccessPORT tune on their car. The infamous email went out on Monday and essentially stated the following. It is titled Project Green Speed Update for April of 2022. The email states, this update will provide you with an overview of the third and final major change that we have implemented as part of our Project Green Speed program. It involves changes to our Access Tuner and Access Tuner Pro software systems. Let's read a few quotes from the email. It goes on to say that it's not going to allow its, quote, partners to develop custom tunes or calibrations that we believe address the new and evolving emissions requirements present in the market and could be CARB EO certified. To do this, we have made changes to our software that eliminate the chance of creating a file that could be viewed by an emissions regulator, i.e. the EPA, as a bypass, defeat, or emissions delete tune or calibration. So what does that mean? Well, to me as a COBB Pro tuner, that means that they're going to disable anything that the EPA could make them legally responsible for. And we've seen the past 3 years or so where the EPA has been cracking down on both tuning and the racing industries and making things difficult. There's a paradigm shift going towards, greener cars and electric cars and everything like that. And I understand the need for that environmentally, but I think in situations like this, it could be a bit of an overreach. The email continues, and then it says, the features that are going to be disabled or removed include, but are not limited to, DTCs, diagnostic trouble codes, check engine lights, etc., O2 sensors, exhaust gas temperature sensors, three-way catalysts, exhaust gas recirculation systems, EGRs, stratified warm-up, tumble generator valves, or TGVs. I'm looking at you, Subaru guys. You're doomed. Secondary air injection, evaporative system, features and tables associated with certain OEM OBD test min-max limits and monitor limits. So in a nutshell, there's going to be a lot of customers that will directly be affected by these changes in their current hardware setups. So what does that mean to you? Well, it depends on your modifications and it depends on your platform. If you are a Subaru guy, for example, and you have a high flow cat that sometimes throws a check engine light and you have TGV deletes, well, your car is going to continue to function as is. Nothing's going to change. But if you need an update to your tune, the update to the software, it's going to remove the ability for your tuner to keep the check engine light off and disable that DTC from popping. So the car will still work, but it might have a little bit of an annoyance. Now on some platforms, disabling those DTCs might stop the car from functioning properly in certain cases. There are certain codes or limits on certain vehicles that you have to disable in order to run more boost, for example. So we'll see how this plays out in practice versus how it's being presented to us now. So it might range anywhere from the annoyance of having modifications that might not be EPA compliant and throwing a check engine light, all the way to, well, now your car can't be properly tuned. So how it's going to affect you personally is really going to depend. Where things get muddy is, yeah, they gave us this list now, regarding TGV deletes and O2 sensors and such. However, you could make an argument that scaling a MAF or scaling an injector might contribute to the CARB compliance of a tune, because it could if it's not tuned properly. And I know I shouldn't be saying that, but if it's done improperly, it could cause issues. Will that eventually be something that's on the table, on the chopping block? I hope not, because if that's the case, we're really in trouble. So these updates go into effect, I believe, on May 1st, give or take. And now there's a mass panic and rush for anyone who wants an update to their tune, who has modifications that may not be compliant to emission standards, to get their tune updated as soon as possible. Because after this update rolls out, you're gonna be stuck with whatever tune that you had before the update, or if you do receive a new tune, it'll be on software that was forced to update and doesn't have these features enabled that we have right now. So for example, if you're a Subaru owner with TGV deletes, your best bet is to put your vape down, call your tuner, and get everything updated before it's too late. Or you might have to revert back to the stock TGVs, half of which people threw out. And I think orders from the dealerships are going to be saturated for TGVs in the next year or so. Mark my words on that. So currently, this is a COBB specific issue. However, the COBB AccessPORT is probably the biggest force in the stock ECU tuning industry. I also saw rumblings of this affecting Ecotech as well, but I do not know the details on that because I've not yet had time to look into it. The email continues, quote, "We will not provide technical assistance or support for old tuning files that include the modification of any of the features that we identified as being emissions-related element of design, and have subsequently removed them from our updated software going forward." So what can we do about this? Well, a lot of people initially thought, easy, I just won't update my software. Well, unfortunately, it seems that the software that's on your computer right now, if you're a tuner, will be disabled by that date. So in a nutshell, there's going to be problems going forward, and a lot of people are very upset by this, and this is a pretty big blow to the aftermarket tuning industry. So a lot of people are abandoning COBB, a lot of tuners are abandoning COBB, and there's a lot of animosity towards COBB for this. And I understand that from the user and pro tuner perspective. I'm a pro tuner myself. However, a big part of the reason that people are upset is because they don't see COBB fighting the good fight against the government overreach in the EPA in this situation. If they can take down a company as large as COBB or get them to bend to their will, then us smaller companies have no chance. Because we don't have the lawyers, we don't have the budget, we don't have the clout to deal with the EPA. However, I don't think COBB does either. I don't think anyone does. So as upset as people are about this, I think COBB had to do what they had to do in order to continue forward and continue business. Because realistically, the writing's on the wall, and chances are the options were this. Option 1, conform to the EPA standards and play ball and continue to be able to do business and sell your products in the US. Option 2, fight the good fight and probably lose that fight and watch that ship sink. If that happens, then we don't have a COBB AccessPORT. I will take a disabled COBB AccessPORT over none at all. So, will your car still work? Well, again, if you have a good tune on your car now and you're not going to modify any more hardware, then you could just keep rocking the tune that you're happy with. But if you're going to update your tune, you might have to make mechanical changes to your car to make sure it can be tuned by the COBB AccessPORT with all of the emissions pieces kept in mind. That being said, there are alternatives. I think if I had to predict the future, a few things are going to change. There's going to be a bigger shift to open source software, ROM Raider, ECU Flash, WinOLS, etc. Because if there's no company behind it and it's a bunch of anonymous people on the web contributing to the software, well, then it's kind of like Vietnam, where you don't know who your enemy is and the EPA doesn't exactly know who to go after. So that's one potential workaround. Option number 2 is, well, if the only thing keeping your car non-compliant is that you have a 100-cell cat on there that trips a check engine light, well then maybe upgrade to a better cat that keeps the system happy and just move on with your life. You might spend a lot of money, you might lose a couple horsepower, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not the end of the world. The third option is standalones. Standalone ECU will do exactly what you tell it to do, and it will not argue with you. It is made for off-road vehicles, and it will do essentially anything a stock ECU will do. It just does it a little differently. So you might see guys with more highly modified cars moving to standalones if they cannot get their cars to be emissions compliant. The only other realistic recourse would be to vote for politicians who are not pushing the EPA's agenda on tuning shops and or car enthusiasts. And while I understand that we have a social responsibility to the environment to clean things up and do better, there are bigger fish to fry, in my opinion, like cruise ships, for example, that do much more damage to the environment than maybe a cat that's a little less efficient than stock, or a VTCS valve, or something that essentially is going to slightly reduce emissions during cold start for 20 seconds. In the grand scheme of things, the harmful gases that puts in the environment, if that is disabled for some reason, is going to be negligible. It's a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things. So again, it's not that I'm anti-environmentalist and all of that. However, sometimes they go a little too hard in one direction when there's a much bigger foe or a much bigger fish to fry, and they tend to go after the everyman rather than the places that will have a significant benefit to clean up. Again, like cruise ships, factory emissions, etc. So I really think they need to reprioritize who they're coming after and let people enjoy their cars and their happiness, because a lot of us work hard and we work long hours, and the thing that makes us happy and the thing that makes us work so hard is being able to tinker with these cars. And if you take that away from us or attack that in any way, you're gonna make a lot of people upset. And maybe politicians should come up with an alternate idea. For example, if you have a classic vehicle, you do not have to meet emission standards. There's a limitation on the mileage you could put on these cars, and they only have certain use cases, but they could be gas guzzlers and polluters, and you will be allowed to drive them on the street. In similar fashion, perhaps a special tuner car or modified car registration might be a good idea. Instead of paying the typical registration of $50 a year or whatever it costs in your state, maybe charge $1,000 a year. And with that extra $950, you can use that as a carbon offset tax, effectively paying a penalty to drive a car that is not emissions compliant. Because in the grand scheme of things, the small extra pollution that comes from that car will be more than offset by the number of trees you can grow for that $950 a year. So maybe $1,000 registration a year for your car isn't something you'd be excited about, but I'd rather have some kind of option than none at all. Or, you know, people could run their standalones or do what they want to do. But I know a lot of people would probably just pay the $1,000 just to avoid the whole headache. So is this going to affect you? How so? What are you going to do about it? And what are your feelings on COBB bowing down to the EPA? Do you think they made the right call for the long haul? Or do you think they should have stood up and fight, even though they would probably lose to that juggernaut? Tell me in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.